Hey pals, Lauren Ober here with a very special Pride edition of The Big Listen. June is Gay Pride Month. That's when the Stonewall riots happened back in 1969 that led to the modern gay rights movement. And we thought it would be nice to mark the occasion with a fun chat with two LGBTQ pioneers, the musicians Tegan and Sara, who also happen to be devoted podcast fans, FYI. The identical twins have been making music together since the mid-90s. They've been openly gay since the start of their career, and they've always been vocal advocates for the queer community.
You know, we always would say, like, we're gay, but we're not a gay band. We're just gay people that are in a band.
Recently, they started the Tegan and Sara Foundation, dedicated to economic justice, health, and representation for LGBTQ girls and women. During our interview, the pair had a lot to say on the joys of air travel, the business of music, and the Beatles of podcasting. Basically, the Canadian pair just had a lot to say, period. They are renowned talkers. Honestly, I could have snuck out of the interview and they would have kept going without me. Anyway, here's Tegan and Sara. Enjoy. Tegan and Sara, welcome to The Big Listen.
Thank you. We're so thrilled to be here with you.
I appreciate that because you guys are busy. You're making music. You're touring, right? What are you guys up to these days?
So we are mostly touring right now, and we're sort of in what we like to call the touring cycle, which generally for us is about 2 years. And we do headline shows, we tour international markets. We're about to start our festival season, and we're gonna wrap up hopefully around Christmas time. And we've also just launched the Tegan and Sara Foundation, which has been very exciting for us, and it's taken up any spare time that we do have when we're not touring. And so we're just keeping really busy.
This kind of disappoints me because I had it in my mind that you guys were just like hanging out by the pool drinking like white wine spritzers or something.
Oh yeah, day drinking. We fit in day drinking in pools as much as possible.
Eating bonbons and just like whiling your days away. So you're actually out working.
We are working, yeah. Occasionally we take some time to really bask in the insanity and apocalyptic nature of American politics, but mostly we're working.
I just bury my head in the sand for a little bit if I were you, but I like that you said we're in a touring cycle. That sounds so formal.
Yeah,
it is quite formal what we do. Like it's funny because
we're very disciplined.
You know, we started in 1997 and we have a very regimented, like, structured organization around us. And Sara and I are still incredibly up to speed on every sort of day-to-day item that's happening, every action item and everything that's open and pending. Like, we really still do a lot of that day-to-day stuff. Next year, we're going to be off, though. And so there'll be a lot of, you can just imagine Sara and I in some sort of pool flotation.
Good.
Drinking,
yes. Pool noodles.
Sunglasses.
Right.
Yeah.
The whole nine.
A lot of noodle action. Yeah.
I know. So when you are touring, when you're doing all this touring, do you have downtime or are you just like filling in all the gaps with business?
No, you know what? Actually, touring is sometimes more relaxing than being home. And that's when we really, I think that's why we love still touring and traveling. When we had to fly back and forth to the East Coast twice in the last 2 weeks and people were around me were like, oh, you must be dreading it. And I thought, no, because I get to listen to all my favorite podcasts. I get to watch all the TV shows I'm behind on and I get to drink wine on an airplane. Like, it sounds like a vacation.
It's so nice. That's our Cabo, is like going on an American Airlines flight and drinking cheap wine.
I'm like, are you sure that I should be on a direct flight to DC? Shouldn't I stop in Austin?
Feel your breath on the back of my neck, back of my neck. Feel your heart beating out of your chest, out of your chest.
So you did mention catching up on the podcasts. Obviously, that is what we do here. What are you listening to? What are both of you? Oh, and I feel like I should mention, if it wasn't obvious already, that you all are related, which is why you sound a little bit the same. And it's radio, and sometimes it's hard to tell, but I don't care that nobody can tell you apart.
That's actually
we don't care.
A consistent theme through our career is like, I don't know, one of them said it. You know, I don't even know why people attempt to quote us as. I mean, I guess when we do separate interviews.
Are you ever allowed to do separate interviews, or is it just like
we do now?
Yeah.
But back in the day, we were like,
if I would have known that, I would have just asked one of you.
I think there's certain things that we do well together, and I think things like this work really well. But sometimes there'll be, a demand, like, can we get both Tegan and Sara on this local paper interview over the phone for 10 minutes? And I'm just like, nah, like, sorry, it's just too confusing.
No shade to local papers or anything, but
No, but they got only 10 minutes. So it's like,
Yeah.
you're going to, you've already heard how much we talk. Can you imagine? You ask me one question, 9 minutes would go by. Sarah would have already disconnected.
Yeah, like I don't think any of those people actually want to like do a 45-minute interview, transcribe it, and then be like, oh yeah, and really, actually, we're just telling people that you're playing at like the local bar tonight. Like they don't really need to hear our life story. But it's interesting about podcasts because I before podcasts were a thing. This is Sarah, just because I want to be clear about
God.
this.
Look what we started now. Now we have to announce ourselves before we speak.
I started listening to This American Life just on public radio when I moved to Montreal in 2002. And when I used to sort of like have to really scrounge around and look for it, and sometimes just have to listen to it as it was going up live on the radio. And one of the things that I completely love about podcasts is just how easily accessible, downloadable some of my favorite episodes are now for a program like This American Life, which has, what is it, like 18 years or something of they've been on the
like
air for
100
18 years. Like a million years since the beginning of time. And so I love now to be able to go back and download, like when we're doing like an international flight, I'll go and like actually look through the archive and download my favorite episodes from the past. And I find that show to be, it's just my ultimate.
It's like your go-to. Yeah.
It's my go-to. It makes me feel safe. It makes me feel happy. It makes me cry. I laugh.
It's like a security blanket.
It's my security blanket podcast.
Yeah.
It really is.
And do you find that that's the only thing that you listen to because their back catalog is massive, or do you listen to some newer things that come down the pike?
Yeah, I spice it up. They're sort of like my
No one has ever said that in terms of podcasting.
That was Sarah.
I like to spice it up sometimes and definitely try something different. But
if people are gonna quote this online later, make sure outside the quotes is Sarah. She also says folks all the time now.
I love folks.
You can always tell if it's a Sarah quote because I would never ever use the word. We're just simple folks.
Yeah, we're just simple folks.
Sarah's transformed herself into Barack Obama.
I'm old now. I love Barack Obama. I would love to be able to speak as eloquently as he does. No, I think that for me, This American Life is almost like my Beatles. Like people are always like,
wow.
you're like, what do you listen to? And they're like, I listen to the Beatles. Everything is about the Beatles, and they compare everything to the Beatles and which albums were better and whatever. And I think in a weird way, I've always been such a like my catalog of what I listen to in terms of music is so big and huge and whatever. It's hard for me to have a Beatles, I guess you could say. But with podcasts, radio programs, for me, This American Life is the Beatles. It's sort of what I compare everything to, and it sort of is where I go back to a lot of the time.
That is a hard bar to clear.
I know it's hard, but I do.
She does
listen to other stuff.
But Sarah does. She doesn't get stuck on something, and she's a avid sharer. So when she finds something she loves, she shares. And Sarah got me into This American Life, but she also recently got me into, this is me segueing into another podcast, by the way, you guys, in case you're
really good
watching
segue,
this.
Tegan.
No, that was great.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you did that for us.
Never
was
gonna stop
really-
talking about This American Life.
Yeah, I was really worried that we would never highlight any other amazing work that's being done out there. But we love Two Dope Queens. Sarah was like, you got to hear this podcast. It's so funny. You're going to love it. And I really love podcasts, and I put them on when I'm cooking and doing stuff like that. But I'd never been on an airplane. I never listened to a podcast. I'd rather music or TV, I'll read. But Two Dope Queens, I became so obsessed with, and I had the whole first season to catch up on. And I loved it and enjoyed it so much. And so I started listening to it on the tour bus, but I would fall asleep halfway through. So, because it's like 3 a.m, right? So I'd spend the first 10 minutes laughing and enjoying, and then I would fall asleep. So the next day I would have to start it back over again. So I feel like I can quote verbatim the entire first season because I've listened to each episode 100 times.
That's right. You absorbed it through osmosis.
Yeah. But I absolutely love that podcast, and then of course got into So Many White Guys after that. I feel like they are so wonderful, and it's really opened up this whole other world now because I listen. Well, I already sort of knew who Cameron Esposito and Rio Butcher were, but that got me into Put Your Hands Together, their podcast.
Yep.
They're so great.
Yeah, they're hilarious.
There's the LGBT Center here in Los Angeles had a big gala this past weekend, and and they hosted the event. And my nightmare is that Sarah and I, we from time to time we get asked to host things, especially up in Canada where we're much bigger and
Like taller.
like compared to the population.
Like everyone there is tiny.
So we've been asked to like host some things in the past and we panic. We're like the exact opposite of most celebrities or musicians or actors or anything like that. Like when people are like, big news, you guys, you got a spot on Conan or whatever. I just am like inside, I think, oh no, 2 more weeks to dread this. And as soon as it's over, I'm so happy we did it. It's very hard to explain to people. We've both processed it a lot, probably with each other and our family and friends and in therapy. But I'll tell you, it's like one of the things that I dread most is that we'll be successful and we'll be asked to do things.
Well, you know how you avoid being asked to do all that stuff is like just don't be good.
Yeah. Well,
Like nobody asks you to do stuff if you're garbage. So maybe just consider.
I think there's also
That's my tip.
There's this really interesting thing too that I think both Tegan and I sort of struggle with, which is that, I mean, you get into at least for us, we got into the music industry to play music. And so a lot of times a lot of these public things that we're so nervous to do don't have anything to do with music. And so a lot of times I think it's about us feeling like, do we even have the skills required like to do this event or whatever? And a lot of times people will say, oh no, you're great or you're funny or here you can memorize this paragraph of like script. And I'm just like, no, I don't know how to memorize anything. I barely got out of high school. It's a miracle that I have this one skill. Like just let me play music. So it's definitely confusing.
I will add to that though that some of my fear about hosting specifically, so not playing on television, but hosting, I can draw a comparison to a podcast. Once again, this is Tegan bringing it back to podcasts. I know, watch this one, you guys. Yeah,
Ugh,
Thank you, Tegan.
Tegan's annoying me. If there's like a live commentary underneath us when this goes up, I'm going to be up in there being like,
it's because I really prepared. I really thought about all the podcasts that I've loved.
I appreciate that.
One of my favorite podcasts of all time was Here's the Thing with Alec Baldwin. And I think what made the podcast incredible and tremendous and interesting, and for me just like one of the best things ever, was that he wasn't just interviewing someone, he was constantly and often interrupting them to tell his own story. And I mean, that wouldn't have worked with any other host. It had to be someone who has had such an interesting story and could insert, anecdotal tales of himself that almost sometimes trumped the person who he's interviewing.
We don't use that word anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We'll bleep it.
Okay,
Don't
bleep it out.
use that
Bleep
word.
it out.
Fine.
Sorry. Ugh. But my fear is that sometimes Sarah and I can't control it. When we get nervous, we get anecdotal and we get, we get silly and we tell jokes and we try to disarm the audience. And and that's a lot of where my fear comes from is that when people, like we did an event last weekend and I caught myself halfway through panicking. Like I just wanted to just run because it's like I start to feel that the room is really paying attention and then I start to panic. Like we've been here too long. We're taking up too much space. Trip Sarah while they're not watching, run. Like it's just, I panic really easily. So,
It's so interesting. It's that Tegan. Okay, like I like the Alec Baldwin podcast as well, but it gives me a lot of stress, so I can't really listen to it very like back to back. But it's so interesting because for some reason I'm thinking to myself right now that I think Tegan really likes like a sort of almost combative approach to she likes loud podcasts. She likes podcasts that are a little messy and like theatrical and there's a lot going on. And I tend to sort of like how I choose a therapist. Like I don't want to know anything about the person hosting the show. Like I listen to Fresh Air with Terry Gross. I don't feel like I know a damn thing about Terry Gross. I have absolutely
and you never
no idea.
will,
and you'll never know.
Never know anything
and
about her.
she might hate the people. You can't tell. Like it's very, very rare that I think to myself, I think Terry likes that person. Like most of the time I think, does she hate that person? Are they giving a good interview? I can't tell. And that's how I feel about therapy. I need my therapist to never say anything about their life, their kids, their partner.
Is there a podcast about therapy?
Oh, I'm sure there are.
There are thousands.
Yeah, a lot of nods.
I'm sure there are a lot of people who are podcasting their own experience about therapy. I'm sure there are therapists their podcasting experience. I mean, it's that feedback loop is deep.
I can't deny I'm begging for attention, dropping hints, hoping for some tension, getting tired of making all this racket.
I had a question for you guys. So I know that you guys have a very long history of being involved in LGBT advocacy and with your new foundation, the Tegan and Sara Foundation. And I wonder if you've ever landed on any sort of LGBT or LGBT adjacent kind of podcast
Adjacent.
that
That's awesome.
you like.
Yeah, actually, the other day, Phoebe actually wrote us. I had been posting about how much I love Two Dope Queens, and she direct messaged and was like, "You guys are so great, thanks. Also, check out Nancy podcast." So we've been enjoying that podcast very much. Well, I just said that about Sarah, but I know you enjoyed the first 2 episodes. Have you been enjoying the rest, Sarah?
Yeah, I have, and I really do. It's interesting as you're saying that about. My mind is kind of spinning like through like. I guess I don't necessarily think of podcasts in those types of categories. I guess I just haven't thought about that before. But again, I mean, sorry to do this. Going back to my Beatles,
Oh, no.
I think one of the things that I loved about This American Life, especially when I first started listening to it, so this would have been about 2002, 2003, was that it was so obvious to me that a lot of the people who were contributing to the show fairly frequently were queer. So like that's where I discovered David Rakoff,
David
Sedaris, of course, and it's Dan Savage. But it's it was sort of one of those things where I felt like it was one of the first examples for me of LGBTQ issues and people sort of integrated into a podcast or a radio show that really didn't have to necessarily be specifically LGBT focused. And also sometimes the stories or the pieces that were being done by a person who was obviously identifying somewhere on the LGBTQ spectrum. But sometimes their stories or, the whatever they were talking about had nothing to do with being queer.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I thought it was a very interesting way of showing that there is a way to sort of speak both as a queer person and about things that are related to being LGBTQ, but have a broader audience be interested in those things, and also have the perspective of a queer person sort of looking at other issues, whether it's like something that's going on in the education system or whatever.
Well, and I feel like that's why Nancy's going to be, I think it's such a cool podcast, because I think that even though it is about it's queer stories and queer people, like I think that they're really amazing stories, and they're really relatable and really moving and educational at the same time. I mean, I got caught crying listening to, I think it was episode 2 where the woman's talking about the woman that had been on the camping trips with the family, like ran the store or whatever, and like the way that she dressed in her
You
keys
should write
and the whole
the
thing. I know, I'm
the
the worst.
episode
I'm sorry.
blurbs for their podcast.
Shut up.
The girl who was talking to a girl who was at a thing about something. So it was awesome.
Whatever. Anyway, it made me cry.
I feel like we are encouraging a culture of bullying here. I feel like this is very not queer of us to be
It's
doing
not very
right
queer at
now.
all.
Oh my God. Snowflakes. Just everyone calm down.
Whatever. Episode 2, Nancy. Next one. So good. That show's going to see a huge uptake in downloads. Oh, whatever. I can't retain anything.
Huge. It's going to be huge. I feel like you guys are such excellent talkers. I think in your, among your fans, you're known as great stage banterers. Banterers. I don't think a banterer is a word, but I'm gonna
make it up. Who cares?
Gonna go with it.
It's end of times on the earth right now. So just go ahead and make up whatever words you want. We'll just banterers away.
It's Lauren Ober's End Times Dictionary, so it's great. But has anyone ever said, "Oh, you guys should have a podcast"?
Oh my God, seriously, it's like you're reading my mind, because I wanted to, like, I wasn't necessarily gonna bring it up if there wasn't an appropriate time, but it's something we talk about all the time. Is that Sarah and I? It truly has changed our lives. Like, neither of us have driver's licenses, and so podcasts really have become this really like thing for us, because we walk and we take buses and trains and we travel all the time, and podcasts have really changed our lives because it's taken that radio listening that we do at home and really like opened up this like incredible spectrum of learning and ideas and whatever. Anyway, point being that in the last couple of years, we've brought it up with our managers a few times that we're really interested in the idea of having our own podcast. And they did some sort of initial investigating, and they kind of came back with like a bit of a Debbie Downer, like, nah, nobody really thinks that that's a good idea, or it's like not they were talking.
Who are these people?
Well, they were like saying that a lot of the people
fire them.
Yeah, they were basically saying that a lot of people kind of had like it's hard to get people to listen, and you can't get people to pay, and we were sort of like, well, we just love the idea of telling stories, as Anyway, so here's the thing,
okay.
that was a lot of information to say this. Yes, we have thought about a podcast, but here's the thing, we have an idea. Do you want to hear it?
Oh my God, yes.
Well,
Is
we
this
have so
Are
many.
you revealing this? Well, I bet you do have a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
We have a lot of ideas. And so who knows which one we'll end up ever doing if we ever do it.
It might be a podcast just talking about all of our podcast ideas.
Yeah, that could be funny. But
I mean, I already subscribed.
okay, great. Our first subscriber. So this is the one that just floated to the top. Who knows if we would actually do it because it might be difficult. But Sarah and I sort of had this concept that would be a little bit like based on two truths and a lie. So Sarah and I, sometimes we are with each other all the time because we are 36 years old.
Take it easy.
What?
Well, just throwing out my age at the same time as your age.
Sorry.
Maybe I don't want to disclose that to this whole new listenership that doesn't know us.
Sarah and I have spent the last 25 years, wink, wink, being sisters and being in this band together. And so we spend all of our time practically together. And so we have all these amazing experiences and we have all these incredible stories. And we've lived this like kind of radical, very strange, very fascinating life. But we're always together. And so just like when we were kids and we would come home and we would fight to tell my mom a story, we have to constantly share space and share a story and let each other have the moment or the punchline. But one thing that we find is pretty consistent is that we're exaggerators and we constantly change details of the story.
Creative storytellers.
Okay, creative storytellers. And so we're often part of what our shtick has become is that we interrupt each other and we challenge each other's story because it's like, Sarah, that did not happen. What happened was...
No, I know. I've been listening this
Right?
entire
Oh my
half an
God.
hour.
Right.
Even
And
the way
so-
she's telling you this idea, I'm like, well, nobody's going to like this idea the way you're telling it.
So we thought it would be really hilarious and interesting, fascinating to investigate stories that we find discrepancies in. So a story that I remember as being like, this is how we signed
good.
this record deal. And Sarah's like, no, that's not what happened. And then we actually go and we investigate, we interview the people and we figure out who is telling the truth. Like who has the story down? What do you think?
I think this has legs.
Can you ask all your podcast people, friends, and
I'm the arbiter of this. Yeah, I don't need to ask those
Can you do
people,
it?
okay? I'm like, but listen, let me tell you that even if you guys just burped into the microphone for a half an hour, it would go straight to the top of the charts.
like a few people would listen?
Like more than a few people would listen.
No, but this is the reason why this one stuck out to us was that we were like, it doesn't even have to be a whole thing about us. I mean, we could bring in anyone. We could bring in Alec Baldwin and pick out the biggest story that he feels people question him on and go and investigate it or talk to them or have someone call in who knows the real story and challenges it. I mean, this happens to everyone. It doesn't even have to be celebrities. I mean, think of...
It happens to me with my girlfriend. I mean, she tells stories all the time, and I'm like, that is not how it happened.
No, of course, we all have our selective memory and our own narratives of things. And I think this has a lot of legs. I would love to continue to gas bag with you guys all evening. However, I imagine that you have things to do and I'm cognizant of your time, but I so appreciate your time, and it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you both.
Oh, for us too. Thank you so much for having us. It was awesome. So fun.
We were very
Thank you.
excited to come and do this. This was a great way to end our week. So thank you so much for having us.
Oh, my pleasure. And listen, when you want to get your podcast off the ground,
We're gonna hit you up.
Just give me a call.
Yep. Seriously, you're going to be
All
like
right.
changing your phone number, but okay.
It's going to be like 2 a.m. Just call it to spitball some ideas.
New phone, who's this?
Yeah. Who does?
Who dis?
Put a little of you into my heart.
Tegan and Sara Quinn are Grammy-nominated musicians and founders of the Tegan and Sara Foundation. To find out more about their music or any of the podcasts they recommended, and there were many, check out biglisten.org. Happy Pride Month, friends. Be good to each other.
See your face makes it hard to move on. Hear your voice, can't manage.